Now, on this video, I'm going to try to show how I installed steel brake lines on my 1982 Suzuki GS 1100E. This is a relatively simple job. It's one of the jobs we were looking forward to doing for a long time already, since the rubber that's on there, the rubber brake lines, are already 40 years old. So we're kind of anxious to get this done today. And in doing so, I'm going to share some information that I know over the years of getting the old brake lines off without scratching the bike or making a mess, ruining the paint, and some really useful tips on bleeding brakes that people that have had trouble in the past bleeding brakes. Those tips have proven to be invaluable, worth sharing. Okay, today's shop project is going to be to replace the brake lines on the GS, the front fork. That the rubber brake lines that are on it now are 40 years old and they're probably well overdue for a replacement. Joe Padula was kind enough to give us a set of spare brake lines that he had. He's already replaced the ones on his bike. I've done several other bikes here. It's a relatively simple job. The biggest thing is to keep plenty of cloths over the painted areas, or areas, in our case we have custom painted wheels, so you don't want to get any brake fluid ever near any painted surface. Think of brake fluid as paint remover. Now, every bike is just a little bit different in this case, and to be fair about it, this was a relatively simple one. I bought the line from, I think they're made in China, I'm not sure. It was about $15 for the part. The most critical thing of a whole job is to make sure the line is not either way too long that it goes spinning around, or that it's too short that when the forks extend, you put tension on it, and that gives you a chance to either have a leak or fracture the line. So measuring the whole thing the first time, really important. Now, brake lines get measured from the end of the brake line to the end of the brake line. When it's, a lot of times you can use a piece of rope and just go right around it. And if you're in doubt, add a ½ inch or an inch, because if the line is too tight, when the forks extend, you do have a safety issue of maybe breaking the fitting or having a potential leak. So that one went pretty easy. The back wheel, of course, exactly the same. Now on the 750, you have, even though it has dual disc brakes, you have what's called a splitter. This goes down into a splitter where it splits the two lines. You always have to take into account also that this is going to be turning side to side, side to side, and you don't want to have it that when it goes in either one of the directions, it gets too tight. So, and I emphasize right in the beginning of the video, measuring and ordering the correct lines is a critical part of doing the job. Once you have the right parts, the job goes pretty smoothly. Now the R1 is a whole different animal. It's got two fittings. We don't have a splitter. Both of them come together at the master cylinder, and measuring the lines for this job was a critical thing. Usually the one that goes opposite is an inch or two longer, but again, it's good if you have the original rubber lines, measure them carefully before you order brake lines. Now the one we're going to do today, the GS, is a relatively simple thing. It's got a master cylinder, and it's going to split down at the splitter, and that piece will just come right off when we're done. And we're going to replace it with two separate brake lines. But what I'm going to do is very carefully, I have a big plastic bag. All of the original parts that go in here, I'm going to put in a plastic bag for the day that may come, and I don't know that day will ever come, that I want to make the bike original, and I've done this already. I've taken the anti-dive off. I didn't see any big difference in performance, to be honest. But then I went through a period of time. Remember, I've had this bike almost 40 years. I went through a time when I wanted to make it all original, all original, all original, and I put that back. We call that evil twinning. But what happens here is you have a double line. Now, I have the fittings already to replace these, and this goes to the anti-dive. One of the things that you do have when you replace that is, and I found this to be the way I dealt with it, I just put, these are air forks, and I used to run 11 pounds, and I'd run 13 pounds, and it made up for the anti-dive. Now on my new MT-09, I don't have steel brake lines. They're a year old right now. Somewhere in the future, that'll be a project, I'm sure. But right now, and I emphasize this, the brakes that come on most modern bikes are hard to improve on, really hard to improve on. So by replacing these, when the rubber is nice and hard and fresh, and you replace it with steel, yes, you get a little bit firmer grip, a little bit different feel, but it's not night and day. When you take a bike that's 40 years old and replace it, you get a much bigger difference in feel to the brake handle. So I just wanted to share that information. Again, I have done this several times, and I try to point out the pitfalls. I try not to leave out any steps, but the first step is to get the GS out so I can work on it conveniently. Now, the lines that Joe donated to the cause, and again, thank you, Joe. These are Russell lines. They have one end removable and adjustable, and they're supposed to be, when he got his GS, these lines came as a direct replacement, so I'm going to measure them first and make sure they're the right length. Now, one of the things you can easily get wrong, it's very easy to get it wrong, is the length. If these are not the right length. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to not fool around with this at all. I want to make sure, and I'm going to kind of do this in overkill. This is the longer of the two that has to go on the other side, because before I take these old lines off, and again, I don't want to put this whole thing together and then say, oh, that line is about an inch too short, or whatever. I just am not in the habit of taking other people's word for things when it comes to measuring. Now this one up here, I'll put some tape on it. And then I've got to see if I'm going to be able to, because we're going to do this a little different. We have two brake lines now, not one. So we need to reroute this in such a way without having any interference on anything. Let's just see if this is going to work the way I hope it does. It's going to come out there. It's going to go down to the fork. Okay, it's going to go through that, up here, come around here. Let's see if this is going to work the way I hope. Back through another confining thing. And this, because we have an adjustable end on one end, we're going to be able to get this in exact alignment. That's going to come up through there. This one came up through the front. I guess we could do it through the front or the back. Let's see what would be the most convenient here. Remember, I've got an air line to deal with here that connects the two forks. Let's go back here. And we'd like to replicate as much as possible exactly how this goes together. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be fine. Okay, but just to be safe, I'm going to do the other one too, and just not fool around with this. So this one, and I'm just trying to make a replication of it. I can put this, a piece of tape up here makes this just a temporary thing. Now, part of the job of taking the old brake lines off is to avoid making what I call a brake fluid mess. And brake fluid dripping and drooling all over your motorcycle, all over the rugs. I have rugs in the shop. This one can come down here. Let's just see how this is going to work out. And I don't want to be overly creative about this, but that does not like to be there. Let's see if it comes out there pretty nice. Turn that around. And that would go down there. And that will be, and it looks like, and the forks are fully extended, it looks like we've got that part of it pretty well in the bank. So we know we have the correct length lines. In fact, if anything, it looks like they might even be a bit on the long side, but that's certainly okay. I need to get the tape off of this because I want these lines out of the way while I'm removing the old brake lines. And as I'm braking all of these connections, I want to have rags under here or little containers. I want to catch all the old brake fluid. And actually, this is going to give me a chance to rejuvenate and reflush the whole system. So I've put towels down everywhere I thought paint could get affected by this. And of course, I don't want to have all of my bikes have very nice paint, most of which I've done, and I don't want to have any deterioration of it. Now, Suzuki uses a different fitting thread than most other bikes, so you've got to be real careful, and that's going to drip out there. So here's what I'm going to do just to make this easy. Take a little piece of paper towel for right now, and just Just try to minimize that. Now with that kind of sealed up from dripping and drooling, and again I've got everything including the floor. I'm going to bring that up over the wheel as I do each side. Again, not having brake fluid all over the place, I'm going to also take a piece of paper towel. This is just to make it easier for me because I don't want to have that mess everywhere. I'm going to fill that hole with a piece of paper towel. Now again, the only purpose of the paper towels is just to avoid anything dripping or drooling while we're disassembling this whole thing. And this, the union bolt, will get replaced with a longer one for the double connections that we're going to make up by the master cylinder. The next step is to fish this through, if we can get it through, with that, even with that little rubber piece on, get that all through there. And get it to come out on the other end. And we will be one more step ahead of the game. Because the new line is going to have to go through these little pieces and fishing the old one out. If I had not put the tissue in there, right now there'd be dots of brake fluid virtually everywhere. Protected the wheel with towels and everything as much as possible. Next thing I want to do is take the anti-dive, and again, trying to be super, super careful about not getting any brake fluid on anything. Now I've had this anti-dive connected, disconnected, on, off, and I really found it to be one of the few features of the bike that really didn't work as well as I thought it would. And I know all the people over the past that have told me they've disconnected it. Nobody really said, oh boy, it ruined the way the whole bike rode or anything. It really was a marginal thing. Now I want to, and again, this is just to keep things relatively neat. Minimize the amount of brake fluid touching painted surfaces here. And this is a really good tip, having these little tissue things. At the end of the day, you have a lot less brake fluid all over the place. Now, of course, anybody with a GS knows you have two choices here. You can block this off with a bolt. In fact, I got the washer in my hand. I want to clean that up. For right now, I'm going to block that off. I do have blocker plates that I made years ago. I have them. But for right now, this kind of keeps the bike original, or looking original anyway. And again, I'm always walking that fine line between an original bike and a bike that runs and performs as good as I can make it. And this is one of the things, again, I haven't found that to be really, really effective, and I've had the bike 40 years. Now these bolts that block this off, and I put a washer, of course, behind it, they seal the forks back up, and they're a special bolt. I had these made from when I had these disconnected before. Okay, so that's now sealed up. We're not dripping anything onto the rotors here, which is of course important. Now the last step is to pull this off at the caliper on both sides and try to get this to come off. I want to take the whole brake line and the splitter all off in one piece. That's my goal if I can do it. Now of course this is the double union bolt here, which may be, I don't know how much fluid is going to come out of this when I break this union, but for sure some is going to come out. And this is the union bolt that we're going to use. Here it comes. Okay, so now we're getting, all of this is coming out of the caliper actually, not out of here. Okay, so we've got that out. For right now, I just want to plug that up. Okay, and we've got the double caliper bolt. Now I've got to pull this off, take the washers out from in between. And luckily, or fortunately, Joe gave us all brand new washers. Thank you, Joe, again. We got all brand new washers here. Oh, that's going to be nice. Okay, now this goes through a clip that I may have to unbolt or take off. I don't know. But the next thing will be I want to put a plug in this. Again, this is just to keep my shop floor clean. It's hard to vacuum up brake fluid. Okay, then this one will come out as soon as I loosen it from the back. This one I've got to loosen here. In fact, this one might pop right out here. I got this one out already. Okay, and just for my own satisfaction here. And I think I mentioned this, I plan on putting this whole brake system right into a giant plastic bag for safe storage in case we ever want to evil twin it out back to what amounts to be a totally stock bike. So up till now, these are some of the parts that we've be using. You have brand new washers. And by the way, washers come aluminum and copper. and I haven't found any big difference in any of them. Joe provided these bolts. These are the block-off bolts, but I made my bolt. This is an Allen bolt. I wanted an Allen bolt. I made that to replace that, so that we don't really need. But I wanted to show the difference between a double banjo and a single banjo. You could see it right there. And this is what we need at the master cylinder now to get both of our lines on. And this part we're not going to use because we're not going to have a splitter anymore. The other side is pretty much a carbon copy, redundant of the other side. I want to be really careful, again, trying to be as careful as I can about getting this brake fluid everywhere. But it is definitely not good for paint. And that little trick of putting paper towels in there as a way of just keeping it clean, I guess, keeping your shop clean, seems to work pretty good for me. And again, it's pretty much the same as the other side, except for the fact this side is going to bleed out as the other side did some of the fluid that's in the caliper. So again, trying to minimize it all with paper towels, and here it comes. Yay! Oh, don't go on my paint. There you go. And obviously once a certain amount comes out, that's the end of it. I think we got it all. That is one bolt that holds the splitter, and it's in a very awkward spot, of course. So, I don't know what to say. We just got to deal with it. Now, there's no loose fluid coming out anywhere. I've got all the lines plugged up. So my goal is to just put this piece in a plastic bag and put it aside for the day that I want to evil twin this back out to a stock bike. And then, of course, you never know when that day's coming. And this comes off of here, and this we're going to put back. That's a wire clip. The splitter, let's get this out. Now you can imagine now if you had, look at that, the octopus. If you didn't have the ends all cleaned up, or if you had these all broken, you'd be raining brake fluid in here. Now we can put these parts in a plastic bag for safe storage. These will be our evil twin. I know somewhere in the future, I hope I don't get the bug to make. See, I always have this, I'm going back and forth. I want to have the look of a stock bike, but I want it to be custom. And I want it stock, then I want it unique. But I guess we all do that. So, but anyway, this will allow me to put it back to total stock. But in this case, these are 40-year-old rubber lines. If I replace anything, I'll replace these before I put them back. They have served their purpose, that's for sure. So again, these are the 40-year-old rubber brake lines, and they are 40 years old, believe it or not. And they can't be as good as when they were brand new, that's for sure. So, and Joe agrees, you know, he's replaced his, and several other people I know have done this already. But it's time, now with the new steel lines, I'll feel a lot more secure slamming that front brake on. So here's the stock. This holds the wires from chafing. So I had to bend this back. But what happens now, because I've removed that piece, I need a shorter bolt. But luckily, I've just got done sorting out my 9 million bolt collection. And I really did have a fun day doing this. It wasn't even worth putting on video. It was kind of boring, in fact. But I got the containers from Harbor Freight, and they worked out perfectly. Now, next part of the job is to put the long one on the side it needs to go on, the side of the clutch, the short one, and thread it all up through the rubber grommets and everything, and get the brake lines in place. Now these have these adjustable ends, so this can be loosened and tightened and put at exactly the right angle when we're done. Now as you thread these up through, you see these rubber grommets come out, and I want to show this too. On the brake line itself, there's a little, I didn't know what that was for, but apparently that's so that you can confine that and keep that from rubbing on the fender. So we're going to be real careful when we thread these back up through and going from the bottom to the top. And in the bottom we'll have this adjustable fitting. We can put a final, I guess, adjustment on that if we have to. Now as I'm threading these back up through, I see there are several choices. I want to just dry fit this by getting this side in place. I'm not sure I can get the second fitting through there. And if I can't, I'll have to figure out, maybe put a zip tie on it or something. But both of them are going to have to fit through that stock thing. And this is back on now, holding the wires in place. So Threading this up back the way it should be is a little trickier than I thought it would be. Now luckily it's a little tricky getting them both through there. You got to really do a little wiggling, but they both fit through the stock location. So now it's a question of I got to make sure I got towels underneath this and get the double banjo hooked on that, and then thread the rest of this through the rubber grommets down at the bottom of the wheel. So I have a washer on there, a brand new washer. I have that on there. Now I need another washer in between the other fitting, and let's see if we want to have that go on top or on. No, you know what? I want to have that one on the bottom. That'll make that a lot easier. And I may have to reroute these more than once to get them to be in a, I'll call it a relaxed position, for lack of a better word. Now this is going to be a little tricky because I don't want to drip. Make sure I got a towel there. I don't want to drip anything extra out of there. And these can go straight down, actually. Anyway, they're adjustable. I'm going to have to figure out exactly where I want to put these when they rotate. I'll have several choices. So that worked out about perfectly. It runs right down through the stock little grommet there. That couldn't have been any better. Now this side looks like it's going to be a piece of cake because it's going to fit right in there by tightening this up. I'm just making these hand tight now, not super tightening them until I get all of the kinks and wrinkles and everything out of it. Now there's one final thing on this part that I've got to deal with. A little bit different than a normal brake line. I have to set this and tighten this up, and you hold it one side with a wrench and tighten the bigger side, and that allows me to get an angle in there if I need it, but it looks like I don't need it, so good for them. Okay, so that's just a little bit more than hand tight. Now I don't know, I can take this off now and I can get this exactly the way I want it. Let's see how this works out. Yeah, that's going to work fine. I don't even think we need that adjustment, but it's nice to know you have it. If you have an adjustment and you don't need it, well that's great. But if you don't have it, now I've got to make sure I've got this pushed back, otherwise it's going to be difficult to bleed this. So these are all the little things that come into it. See, I need to get the wrench in there. That'll lean back and that'll allow it to come up here. There's a lot of little tricky stuff. This is a little rubber bushing, and this goes into this little guy up here to give that some, press that in. That didn't work. I guess you got to get this in the first way. And that's what that little, I know that's what that little metal thing, I didn't know what that was in the very beginning. So it looks like that's what that's for. Okay, so that's got to get pulled in correctly. There we go. This side really worked out well. We're right in exact the stock confinement. We're through the rubber grommet and out at the top, and we've got a nice joint up there. It just couldn't have been better. The other side is pretty much the same. We'll be doing that, and then we'll be ready to, once we're happy with that, we're ready to do the brake bleeding. So basically all the parts we need if we ever want to evil twin this back to a stock bike, they're right in that plastic bag. We'll put that away. Very convenient to store it. And we'll put the extra fittings back in inventory. We do have extras on this. And remember, Suzuki, I think, is the only one uses that super fine thread. Now the next thing in the job, we have to bleed the brakes. There's several good ways to do this. I prefer the old school way of just pumping the system, and it takes longer to do that than if you have the reverse pump. I tried the reverse pump. I was always afraid I was going to spit brake fluid out all over the place, and I based my old school thing on is a lot less mess. So the first thing is to remove the cap, and needless to say, I have old towels on everything I possibly can cover here, just so I don't have any chance I splash this or do some way get that brake fluid off. Now while I'm bleeding it, I catch all the residual fluid in a little jar because I don't want to get it all over the place, of course. And of course this is just going to take a little time, little by little. I'm going to pump that fluid into one side. The manual always says to bleed this side first when you have that interconnected thing with the anti-dive, so I'm going to basically bleed this side and do that side last. You'll see, this definitely does take some time. Now, just to get the fluid started, this is a pump that I had from Model Aviation. You can put a negative pressure on it, and all that does is put negative pressure, and that allows the fluid to flow down a lot faster. It's just a time saver. And of course, I'll do the same thing to the other side. And with that negative pressure, even slight, you just fill up what's happening. You fill up the reservoir. It just sucks the fluid down in there relatively quickly. And now, without that, it really can take a long time. In fact, it takes so long, sometimes you really start getting annoyed. But that is a good trip. That is a good tip. And a little bottle. Once I get the fluid in there and I'm bleeding air bubbles out on both sides, I'll hook the jar back up and I'll be good to go. Now, actually, back in the old days, you didn't even have that little pump, but I can remember several people, we were bleeding brakes, and they just suck on a line like it was a soda straw. I don't know if that's really, really old school. Anyway, I don't want to drip that on anything. And now I have to go back, and this is the same thing. You only have to just get a little negative pressure on it, the slightest little amount. And you'll notice that fluid level goes down really fast. As soon as you see it coming out the bottom, it'll come into the tube. You're pretty much home free all. And then it's just a question of bleeding out the few air bubbles that'll still be in there. You can see that vacuum thing is already sucking air bubbles out. Now, if I do this, watch, I was hoping I could show this in a way that makes sense. If I can get this up on the camera and I can put a little negative pressure on there, you'll see right away, oh, there comes some bubbles. Look at that. See how quick it pulls the air out? That's a really, really useful tip. That really is a time saver when you got to fill up. In this case, I got to fill 2 calipers and 2 full brake lines. And I don't have a lot of pressure. All I need is a couple of pounds negative pressure to do that. And that is really a good tip. Now, the other side went even quicker because we, of course, have fluid now. Now, the beautiful part is we have fluid. In a matter of a minute or so, we have the whole lines and the calipers full. And now the traditional thing of bleeding it, and you watch that fluid go down so quick. But we got to keep refilling that master cylinder now. And I want to get every single air bubble out of there. And I want that, of course, will make the lever a lot harder and more predictable. Now, I basically have been able to get every single air bubble out of here. And already, I can feel the lever is way stiffer than it was. Way more solid. And his whole job could not have gone better. I'm totally impressed. Our little suction method, I hope that proves valuable to somebody, especially if you're kind of old school like I am. But I know the reverse pump works well too. Luciano has that pump, and this job just could not have gone better. Now, I have to be honest, and I always try to be as honest as I can on my video, of course, because people find out when you fake things out. But here's something I didn't expect, to be honest about this. I expected this to be about 10% more solid. It's way more than 10%. Now, I think I know why. Because these lines, being 40 years old, they're doing this. They're like zucchini going. But now with the steel line, boy, this is the most gain in firmness I've had of all the bikes, even the R1. The R1 didn't gain much at all. It gained some, but not this. That is really, really amazing. Anyway, I want to thank Joe for, needless to say, these worked out perfectly. They're Russell brake lines, and they fit perfectly. They went right through all the old mounting points. And so I'm thinking if you have a GS and you're converting it over, as I just did, allow about 2 hours and some fresh brake fluid. And if you don't have a little suction thing like that, just get your friend to pretend it's a milkshake and put some negative pressure on that. But anyway, it did work out great. Again, this is really, I think, and I can't wait to go ride the bike now. And I don't have time today, of course. I can't wait to get out there. And boy, anytime you get into a corner a little too hot and you just want to go, and all of a sudden the level, this is going to really be nice. So if you're new to the channel, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope they always put some decent information out there, some good tips, something that'll help those of us who share the passion of restoring and riding old motorcycles. And this turned out to be a bigger upgrade than I thought it would be. I was thinking, yeah, the hand, yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a. This was a good gain. Now, and I know, final thing, when I spoke to Joe, and of course he has done this to his bike already. He wanted, the reason I have these is he wanted to keep the bike looking stock, so he ordered these black. Now you can order them all different colors, I know that. I've seen, but when I was buying the ones for the R1, I was going to get blue ones or something. Just wasn't into it. I wanted the steel ones. So the thing is, that would give you kind of the best of all worlds. Is it looks like they're old, but they're not old. But getting rid of 40-year-old rubber brake lines. Now I'm so convinced and happy the way this worked out. I'm going to go down and see if I can get the rear brake line for this. That'll be a job for another day. And I'm excited about having this. This was an upgrade, and I try so hard to keep these bikes running well. I've owned it since it's new. I've evil twinned it out. I have a spare bike. I'm connected to this bike, and I love it. And many of my friends that have these bikes really pay the price to keep them nice. This is a nice specimen of an 82 bike, and I like to keep it as new and as safe and as running as well as I possibly can. So again, we do try to post up a video every day. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, we'll see you tomorrow. Now, a passion for old motorcycles, it covers a lot of ground. First off, finding these bikes, and there's been quite good adventures finding them. And thank you, Luciano, for your help over the years finding them. And then restoring them, and we have all those videos on our channel. All these restorations, all this paintwork, all the wheels, all the evil twins. It's on our channel. Put my name in quotation marks, and then the subject or the bike you're looking for. It's all out on the channel. Over 2,000 videos. Enjoy them all. And if you enjoyed the channel and you enjoyed this video, share it, and we'll see you tomorrow.